gas and hurtle back toward Earth. Still, the three pilots remained in the enclosed gondola. Only after the remaining hydrogen gas exploded did they finally bail out, miraculously surviving unharmed. The altitude the balloon had reached was calculated as being 624 feet less than the world record, which had been set by the Soviets. Darn it! 1 year later, the Explorer 2 was launched from the same site and reached an altitude of 72,395 feet this time, setting a new world record. It's not a place where we'll see much evidence of the incredible events that took place there. Though if we really want to thoroughly Although you might think that the Black Hills are part of the Rocky Mountains, Running Slim surged ahead to the lead. None of the other animals could keep up, and many were trampled underfoot. As the race went on, the other animals who were still running eventually began to tire, and soon blood began to spurt out of their mouths and nostrils. Still, Running Slim thundered on. One by one, each situation building here. In 1992, the FBI raided the Black Hills Institute and seized the fossil. It turns out that not only was Larson's claim to the fossil disputed by these other parties, but the National Park Service had already been investigating the Black Hills Institute for years for having illegally removed other fossils from public lands. 4% of South Dakota is a woodland ecosystem, and almost all of those trees are located here in the Black Hills. Originally, the Lakota called this area Pahasapa, which means hills that are black. And when looking from a distance, the landscape here does indeed appear to be black. This is because of all the evergreen trees like pine and spruce, which only grow in this area. So though not absolutely black, it's definitely way darker than the rest of South Dakota. Control beetle outbreaks by cutting down and removing afflicted trees and thinning forests that are at risk. Railroad buff, and I'm always a little surprised just how many people are interested in old trains. In town, we'll also find the Black Hills Institute, which you heard about, and will interest dinosaur fans. Coming up on our left, it is impossible to miss the signage for the 1880 train. If you're interested to see if you can join the next steam or diesel train departure, take the turn in to the left. I promise you will have no trouble finding your way. For everything else, we should stay here on 385, and the road will bend around to the left to take us through the town's main street. The Black Hills Institute is coming up quickly on our right if we need a little dinosaur time. The next 3 blocks are the town, and most things are pretty self-explanatory. There are quite a few Western-styled eateries, including the Mangy Moose on the left side and Desperados 2 blocks down on our right. If we're anxious to keep going, all we have to do is keep going straight. Emerging from Thunderhead Mountain is spectacular. I'll talk a little more about it as we approach the entrance if we decide to go. just briefly during the time when tensions and conflicts between gold seekers South Dakota's tallest mountain was renamed Black Elk Peak in honor of Sioux medicine man Black Elk, who had an important vision at this spot in 1872. The mountain's original Sioux name was Hihankaga, or Owl Maker, but in 1855, the U.S. Army renamed it Harney Peak after General William S. Harney. This turned out to be a pretty contentious decision in forces that killed Sioux women and children that same year in the Battle of Blue Creek. For 5 decades, the Sioux petitioned the government to have the name changed, but met with no success. In 2015, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names suggested that the name be changed back to Hihankaga, but could not reach consensus. But a year later, the board voted unanimously to change the name to Black Elk Peak. So who was Black Elk? Black Elk was a Lakota Sioux and a second cousin of Crazy Horse. He participated in many of the most famous conflicts of the time, including the Battle of Little Big Horn. Nyhart describes Black Elk's spiritual views and many of the important events that took place in his life and in Sioux history. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung and the American academic Joseph Campbell were both well-known supporters of the book. Interestingly, Black Elk and his family converted to Catholicism in 1904 while in his 40s in order to help his children assimilate into the modern world. But despite this, he later claimed that the only religion he believed in was the religion of the pipe. As he stated, "All the things of the universe are joined with you who smoke the pipe. All send their voices to Wakantanka, the Great Spirit. When you pray with this pipe, you pray for and with everything." We have some Switch Lake, and the third is the trailhead for Black Elk Peak, also known as Harney Peak. Before we take the turn for the lake, we'll pass the historic Sylvan Lake Lodge on the left, although you won't be able to see much through the trees. South Dakota's tallest, the mountain's original Sioux name was Hihankaga, or Owl Maker, but in 1855, the U.S. Army renamed it Harney Peak after General William S. Harney. This turned out to be a pretty contentious decision, as Harney was most well known in the region for commanding forces that killed Sioux women and children that same year in the Battle of Blue Creek. For 5 decades, the Sioux petitioned the government to have the name changed, but met with no success. In 2015, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names suggested that the name be changed back to Hihankaga, but could not reach consensus. But a year later, the board voted unanimously to change the name to Black Elk Peak. So who was Black Elk? Black Elk was a Lakota Sioux and a second cousin of Crazy Horse. He participated in many of the most famous conflicts of the time, including the Battle of Little Big Horn and the Wound with Everything. When magma underground is slowly pushed upwards, gradually cooling off as it goes. This process often results in large crystals made up of shiny mica, feldspar, or quartz. This durable granite comprises flow if we want to wait for someone to leave. Or we can try on the other side of the tunnel, where there are 2 more overlooks and there's more parking.
Man, this is cool. Look at this. Holy cow. Wow. Really cool. Holy shit. Jesus, that was neat. Man, look at that. Pretty awesome.
1923, state historian Doane Robinson had to stop not far from here after his Model T overheated while driving along the Needles Highway. While waiting for his son to return with water to cool down the car, Doane looked up and had a revelation. What if the spires in front of him were carved with the faces of Western legends like Kit Carson and Red Cloud? Well, eventually his son returned with the water, and they got the car running again, but Doane didn't forget about his vision. When he returned to the state capitol, he proposed the idea to Senator Norbeck as a way to promote tourism in South Dakota. Robinson and others began to drum up support for the project, and 1 year later, sculptor Gutzon Borglum returned with Robinson to the cathedral spires to see if his vision was realistic. However, in the meantime, a fair amount of opposition to the project had grown. The Sioux, who consider the area sacred, were opposed to the project, as were many residents of South Dakota who felt that creating a massive sculpture would destroy the natural beauty of the area. Ultimately, Borglum decided that there were too many large crystals in the Needles granite to make it suitable for carving. And so the fair continued to scout for another suitable location, settling on Mount Rushmore. They also changed the nature of the project to focus on presidential figures rather than Western icons. For the energetic, the spires make for a strenuous 2.3-mile round-trip hike with 500 feet of elevation gain. And you should expect to do some scrambling. You'll see parking on the tight right hairpin.
Jeez, look at that. Thank you.
Looking out on this landscape with wild stone pinnacles, do you inexplicably feel the urge to climb to the summit of one? When we've stopped the car to take a photo, have you paused to run your hand over the side of a boulder, or scrambled up a slab of rock to get a better view, or maybe the perfect angle for a panoramic picture? If so, it might be that you have the soul of a rock climber hidden inside. To the uninitiated, climbing might look pretty scary. Make that terrifying. But there's no denying its intrinsic primal appeal. Hopefully, if the weather is good by now, we've seen some climbers, as rock climbing is arguably the most popular sport in the Black Hills. But how does it all work exactly? Are climbers really safe? Or are they no better than high-risk thrill seekers? Well, the sport of climbing has come a long way the second person, or the follower, up the route. In this way, pitch by pitch, a pair of climbers can eventually reach the top of anything they can climb, and do so in relative safety. In order to get down from the top of a steep spire, you then need to rappel.
What the fuck, dude? What an asshole.
If you do rent a self-guided audio tour, you should expect your visit to take about 90 minutes to 2 hours. If you choose to go on your own, I recommend walking the President's Trail, which is a little over often if you're feeling short of breath. If you don't have the time or energy for the President's Trail, the Grand View Terrace is a good spot to admire the sculptures and take some photos. Anyone excited? Let's keep in the right lane here to exit. Once we exit, choose whichever toll booth lane looks like the shortest, other than the right-hand entrance lane, which is for oversized vehicles like RVs and buses. After getting your parking ticket, look for a spot in the garage. It's a short walk from the parking area to the monument entrance. Now, one last important thing before we go in. Uh-oh, looks like we've exited from Mount Rushmore the wrong way. If you wanted to follow my tour route, I do not have commentary going this way. I always recommend doing the full tour loop by exiting from Mount Rushmore and driving towards Keystone. We have two options. There's a safe way to turn around coming up just around this bend at a place called the Profile View. It's actually a pretty great viewpoint too, and you'll see George Washington. The alternative is for us to keep driving straight ahead, and in just under 15 minutes, you'll be able to join the Black Hills Loop route at the junction with Highway 16. But remember, if you do continue this way, I will not have commentary until then.
In a quarter mile, you will arrive at your destination.